The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat that usually plagued the lower valleys. Overhead, storm clouds, heavy and bruised purple, gathered ominously around the peaks of the Montana mountains. In a meadow of tall, swaying grass, where the forest began its dense ascent, stood a man offering water to a woman. He was Elias Thorne, a solitary figure whose life was carved from the rugged wilderness he called home. His face, weathered by wind and sun, was partially obscured by the brim of a dark, wide-brimmed hat. A charcoal gray vest covered a practical work shirt, and a worn leather holster with a heavy Colt revolver rested on his hip. His eyes, though weary, held a deep, unwavering resolve as he looked at the woman before him. Her name was Lena, and she was a vision of raw, desperate fragility. Her once white dress was a tattered, blood-splattered ruin, clinging precariously to her slender frame. Her long, disheveled hair, the color of autumn leaves, fell across her face, partially obscuring eyes that were wide with terror and confusion. Blood, both dried and fresh, stained her left arm. Her hand held out, as if in supplication, trembling uncontrollably. Elias held out a large, clear glass jug, filled with water, its surface cool and inviting. "Here," he said, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly gentle for a man of his build. "It's clean, fresh from the spring." Lena's gaze was fixed on the jug, a mixture of desperate thirst and profound distrust in her eyes. Her bloody hand, still trembling, reached out hesitantly, her fingers barely grazing the cool glass. He had found her hours ago, stumbled upon her as he checked his trap lines deep in the foothills. The sound of distant shouts, followed by a single, sharp gunshot, had drawn him off course. He'd followed the trail, a tangled path of broken branches and trampled undergrowth, to a small, isolated hunting camp, now a scene of utter carnage. 3 men, rough and hardened, lay dead, victims of a sudden, brutal attack. And then he'd seen her, fleeing through the trees, a terrified deer running from an unseen predator. He knew the kind of men who roamed these mountains: trappers, prospectors, some honest, some desperate, some pure evil. The men she'd been with were clearly of the latter kind, judging by the whiskey bottles and crude weapons scattered around their camp, and the fact that she was the only one left alive, injured and terrified, told its own grim tale. Now, as her fingers finally closed around the jug, she pulled it to her lips with a frantic urgency, gulping down the water. Elias watched, his jaw tight. He knew the thirst was as much for salvation as it was for hydration. "Slowly now," he cautioned, his hand gently touching her elbow. "Easy does it. Don't want to make yourself sick." She flinched at his touch, a small, involuntary shudder, but then seemed to relax slightly under his steadying hand. She took a few more sips, then slowly, reluctantly, lowered the jug, her eyes, now clearer, fixed on his. Who are you?" she rasped, her voice hoarse and raw. "Elias Thorne," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "Just a man who lives in these mountains." "What happened here, child?" Her eyes clouded with a fresh wave of terror, and she recoiled slightly. They came, 3 of them. They were, ... beasts." She shuddered, pressing her bloody hand to her mouth, as if to stifle a scream. They killed the others. Tried to take me." Elias's jaw tightened further. He'd suspected as much. "The men in the camp." She nodded frantically. They were cruel men. They brought me here, against my will, from the valley. But these others, they were worse." Her voice broke, and a sob tore from her. "Oh God, I thought I was next." He remained silent for a long moment, letting her grief and terror wash over her. He saw the marks on her, fresh bruises blooming on her pale skin, the desperate fear in her eyes. "They won't be bothering you no more," he said, his voice low and firm, a promise. "I found 'em. They're dead." He didn't elaborate. Didn't tell her how he'd found them, or how he knew they wouldn't bother anyone ever again. Some things were best left unsaid. She looked at him, her eyes searching, trying to decipher the unyielding strength in his features. You killed them?" she whispered, a strange mix of horror and relief in her voice. He simply nodded. They deserved it. A long silence settled between them, broken only by the gentle rustle of the grass and the distant call of a hawk. Lena took another hesitant sip of water, then handed the jug back to him. Her hand, though still trembling, was no longer quite so frantic. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little stronger. "For the water, for stopping them. You need to get out of these mountains," Elias said, his gaze sweeping over the darkening sky. "Storms come in, and there's still danger out here. But where do I go?" she asked, her voice tinged with desperation. "I don't know this place. They brought me from far away. I don't even know which direction." "There's a small logging town, 2 days' ride down in the valley," he said. "Last Chance Creek. There's a stagecoach there. Can get you to Helena, get you to civilization." She looked at him, her eyes wide. 2 days? I can't walk that far. My feet are bruised." And she gestured to her tattered dress, her exposed legs. "I'm not dressed for it." "You won't have to walk," he said, his gaze steady. "My horse is tied a little ways back. I'll take you." Lena recoiled slightly, a fresh wave of fear tightening her features. "No, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to cause more trouble." "You ain't a burden, child," Elias said, his voice firm, unwavering. "You're a human being who's been through hell, and I ain't leaving you out here to die. That ain't how I operate." He held her gaze, his eyes conveying a quiet authority that brooked no argument. "Now, can you stand?" She tried, pushing herself up, but a fresh wave of dizziness washed over her, and her legs buckled. Elias moved swiftly, catching her before she fell, his strong hands steadying her. Her body felt impossibly light, fragile, easy. "Now," he murmured, his arm going around her waist to support her. "Just lean on me. We'll take it slow." He half-carried, half-guided her through the dense undergrowth, carefully picking his way over roots and rocks. The air grew colder, the scent of rain stronger. Lena, her head resting against his shoulder, felt the solid warmth of his body, the rhythmic thud of his boots on the earth. She found a strange, unexpected comfort in his presence, a sense of safety she hadn't known in weeks. By the time they reached his horse, a sturdy sorrel named Maverick, the first drops of rain were beginning to fall. Elias quickly helped Lena into the saddle, then mounted behind her, his arms going around her to hold the reins. She was stiff, her body aching, but the rain was a cold shock that brought a grim determination to her eyes. "Hold on tight," he instructed, urging Maverick forward. "We need to find shelter before this storm truly breaks." The ride was a blur of driving rain and biting wind. Elias rode with a quiet competence, his eyes scanning the darkening forest, his body a solid anchor against the elements. Lena huddled against him, felt the warmth radiating from his body, a small shield against the cold. She closed her eyes, letting the rhythmic sway of the horse, the steady presence of the man behind her, lull her into a strange, dreamlike state. They found shelter in a small, abandoned trapper's cabin, barely more than a shack, nestled deep in a gully. It was crude, but it offered protection from the storm. Elias quickly built a fire in the stone hearth, the flickering flames chasing away the gloom and the chill. He offered her more water, then some dried venison and hardtack from his saddlebags. This time, she ate with a touch more appetite, the food slowly rekindling a flicker of strength within her. "Thank you," she whispered, looking at him across the small, crackling fire, "for everything. You truly are a godsend, Elias Thorne." He grunted, a non-committal sound, his gaze fixed on the flames. "Just doing what needs to be done. No use leaving a soul to the elements." They spent the rest of the night in silence, punctuated by the roar of the wind and the drumming of rain on the cabin roof. Elias took the first watch, his rifle across his knees, his eyes scanning the gaps in the logs, his ears attuned to every sound. Lena, wrapped in his blanket, drifted into a fitful sleep, her dreams haunted by the recent horrors, yet strangely comforted by the unwavering presence of the man who had saved her. Dawn broke clear and cold, washing the world in shades of crisp blue and vivid green. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape refreshed and vibrant. Elias packed their meager camp, careful to douse the fire completely. He helped Lena onto Maverick, then mounted behind her, his arms going around her to hold the reins. Her small body felt less fragile now, a new resilience beginning to bloom within her. The ride down to Last Chance Creek was long and winding. Lena, though still bruised and aching, rode with a quiet determination. The fear in her eyes had receded, replaced by a quiet watchfulness, a burgeoning strength. They talked little, but a silent understanding grew between them. She learned that he was a loner, a man who preferred the company of mountains and forests to that of people. He learned that she was from a small farm in Iowa, that she had been lured west by the promise of adventure and opportunity, only to fall into the hands of ruthless men.